Refinery is the end target of crude petroleum, and it doesn't matter whether it's offshore, which is going abroad, or refining it locally. Now, if we understand that, then people will come to realize that there's a massive investment to be able to transform crude oil to refined products, which is your PMS, your AGO, and so on and so forth. When you don't have that investment, which is in refineries, product must be brought from abroad. And if the product is going to be brought from abroad, there's a landing cost. And that landing cost is more or less the wholesale price plus margin to whoever is going to market the product that's brought from abroad. And if the government or the institutions that be will not allow the market clearing price of that imported product to occur, then somebody has to pay for the difference. And that's how subsidy came into existence.
In 1996, Nigeria experienced the worst fuel scarcity in the country. Citizens queued for an average of 2 to 5 days to buy fuel. Cost of transportation tripled, cost of foodstuff increased, and people walked for miles on end because they could not afford inflated transport fares. Those that could waited long hours to catch the scanty public transport available. To mitigate against fuel queues in the country, statistics show that an average of 55 to 60 million litres of petrol is loaded out of depots daily. Industry experts postulate that Nigerians consume a daily average of 30 to 35 million litres. The residual quantity goes out the borders of the country, subsidizing other countries.
Because our pricing mechanism is not consistent with global pricings, what you find is that the average price of refined petrol, PMS, in West Africa is anything between 280 to 320 naira per litre, while in Nigeria we're selling at 145 naira. That is a recipe for smugglers, what we call a smuggler's paradise.
So who are those really benefiting from subsidy? Is it the commercial or private vehicle owners? The owners of generators? The neighboring countries that the products are moved to? Or Nigeria as a whole? Are the effects of the subsidy equally beneficial to everyone? In the last 8 to 9 years, Nigeria has spent over 10 trillion naira on subsidy. In 2019 alone, almost 1 trillion naira was spent on subsidy, and in that same period, Nigeria budgeted about 600 billion naira for education and 400 billion naira for the healthcare sector. If half the funds spent on subsidy in the last 8 to 9 years were invested in the healthcare development of Nigeria, Nigeria would have built over 500 equipped health centers and paid healthcare workers better, thereby retaining them in the country. Most importantly, we would have been better prepared and equipped for the COVID-19 pandemic. Nigeria has only about 42,000 doctors to cater for a 200 million plus population. We are losing doctors to foreign countries with better working conditions and functioning equipment in their hospitals. Education is one of the sectors in Nigeria that needs the most investment. With 200 million plus Nigerians, 70% of which are young, Nigeria's future is dependent on the deliberate and proper education of its youth. Dilapidated infrastructure, ill-equipped and poorly paid educators are some of the factors inevitably hindering the progress of education in the country. If If the effect of subsidy is so devastating to the Nigerian economy, why continue with it?
Unfortunately, it has become a burden on the federal government, where nearly 1/4 of the annual budget is spent on subsidizing petroleum. To the extent that what government over the last 10 years subsidizing petroleum, which is even just PMS alone, it's more than what the government spent on infrastructure and on health and education. And so subsidy has become more or less an elephant that is a burden on the federal government, and it's affecting nearly everything that the federal government wants to do. Government responsibility to educate the public that the social welfare loss because of petroleum subsidy is so much. It's huge. Look at the hospitals. They're bad. No equipment. Look at roads. We don't have many tarred roads that are functional in some parts of the countries. In nearly every part. Look at education. No research labs. In fact, professors are paid something far below living wage, that you are spending so much money of the budget for petroleum subsidy. So the time for this to be removed is here.
The Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency, PPPRA, was established in 2003 and tasked with the responsibility to attain a strong, vibrant downstream subsector of the petroleum industry, where refining, supply, and distribution of petroleum products are self-financing and self-sustaining. With the law establishing the PPPRA, the road to full deregulation and liberalization of the downstream sector became open for all the stakeholders in the sector to play their part according to the rules and guidelines as will be unfolded by PPPRA based on its functions. 17 years later. 1. On a positive note, AGO and DPK have been deregulated. However, 2. Infrastructure is substandard and in some cases inexistent. Refineries are not working. Pipelines are damaged. Trucks are old and dilapidated, causing high accident rates. Many stations and depots have closed down. 3. Industry stakeholders continue to complain about making losses. This is reflected in the performance of those quoted in the Nigerian Stock Exchange, etc. Yet, NNPC subsidized fuel up to almost 1 trillion naira last year through its under-recovery program. This is hardly self-sustaining.
With respect to the effectiveness of PPPRA, let me tell you that you cannot be effective if you don't have the capacity. And there is something in the name. The name of the organization presupposes that their main function is price regulation. But if you look at their function when this thing was formed, it is actually about managing the volatility in petroleum prices. And with respect to that, using subsidy as the only means to manage the petroleum volatility is too expensive.
For a bottle of beer, the production costs is probably 60 or 70%. The transportation cost and the logistics cost is about 30%. The transportation and logistics cost is not the raw materials to factory to market, right? And market to, distributor to supermarket or outlets. And one of the major ingredients of this cost structure is the fueling of the vehicles. If you have fuel efficient structures in terms of refining, distribution, and outlets, you can reduce that cost by as much as almost from 30% of what it is today, 35%, to something like 10%. I want you to imagine if you take 20% or so off the cost of production and distribution of most of the companies in Nigeria, you're talking about a GDP of $420 billion. 10% of that is over $40 billion, right? I want you to imagine that, right, as a form of the advantage to the ordinary man.